Putin says he's ready to meet Zelensky. But only after the groundwork is done. Zelensky says, skip the talk, let's meet now. A possible summit, a divided mandate, and a war that hasn't slowed down. Meanwhile, Trump sends his envoy. Russia talks peace and launches missiles. And nuclear subs quietly shift beneath the seas. This is VERTEX, and maybe the meeting that ends the war or exposes the lie. Russian President Vladimir Putin will be open to a meeting with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky once all the necessary preparations have been completed by delegations from the two countries, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said on August 4th. Peskov reiterated Moscow's stance during a regular press briefing, stressing that a
Putin-Zelensky summit can only come after the necessary work on the expert level is done and sufficient distance is crossed.
Putin's spokesperson did not provide details or additional information on what precisely this preparatory work involves and what Moscow's expectations are regarding the possible meeting between the two. Zelensky has claimed that substantial negotiations with Russia are only possible if he and Putin are directly involved. Moscow maintains that Zelensky's legitimacy is in doubt and that a meeting must only come after a peace deal is broadly agreed by the two parties. Zelensky, whose presidential term expired last year, remains in power despite provisions in the Ukrainian constitution which require the transfer of power to the Speaker of Parliament in such a scenario. Russia considers Zelensky's disputed status an internal Ukrainian matter, but has argued that the legality of any international treaty he signs could be challenged as a result. Zelensky also reiterated his willingness to meet with Putin.
We understand who calls the shots in Russia, and thus Ukraine is once again offering to move beyond technical talks, not to exchange statements, but to actually meet at the level of leaders.
Zelensky has been repeatedly calling for a meeting with his Russian counterpart. When the direct talks between Kyiv and Moscow were renewed in March this year, Zelensky personally went to Turkey, calling on Putin to come to Istanbul for direct negotiations between the presidents. Putin was a no-show and has been rejecting the possibility of meeting Zelensky since then. The Ukrainian leader has claimed that Putin's failure to talk with him directly proves that Moscow does not seek peace. The Kremlin also said that the Russian President Vladimir Putin may meet the US envoy Steve Witkoff this week.
We are always happy to see Mr. Witkoff in Moscow, and we are always happy to have contacts with Mr. Witkoff. We consider them important, substantial, and very useful.
Peskov also said that Moscow considers contacts with Witkoff important and very useful. He praised the US mediation efforts in search of ways to settle conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
We do not rule out the possibility of such a meeting between the Russian President Vladimir Putin and US envoy Steve Witkoff. The dialogue continues. The United States continues their mediation efforts in search of ways to reach Ukrainian settlement. These efforts are very important, including in the context of the ongoing direct Russian-Ukrainian negotiations. The work continues.
Earlier, US President Donald Trump had said Special Envoy Steve Witkoff would travel to Russia, potentially on Wednesday or Thursday. The Kremlin said on August 4th that everyone should be careful about nuclear rhetoric in its first response to a statement by US President Donald Trump that he had ordered a repositioning of US nuclear submarines. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov played down the significance of Trump's comments, saying,
Naturally, we think that everyone should be very careful with the nuclear rhetoric. In this case, it's obvious that the American submarines are already on combat duty. That's standard procedure. But generally, we'd prefer not to engage in such debates or comment on this matter. We're extremely cautious with any statements regarding nuclear issues. As you know, Russia maintains a responsible position.
Trump, on August 1st had said he had ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions in response to remarks from former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev about the risk of war between the nuclear-armed adversaries. Meanwhile, Peskov said the Kremlin has downplayed fears of nuclear escalation, even as tensions remain high between Moscow and the West over Ukraine and NATO posture in Eastern Europe. Speaking to reporters in Moscow, Peskov reaffirmed Russia's official position that nuclear weapons must never be used.
There can be no winner in a nuclear war. This is the main idea of our position. We don't believe the current situation is an escalation of some kind, but we recognize that there are extremely complex and sensitive matters being discussed, issues that many understandably view with strong emotions.
When asked about Medvedev's recent remarks, Peskov sought to distance Kremlin's official policy from what he described as differing professional views within Russia's leadership.
In every country, leadership members have differing professional views on current events and maintain different attitudes. There are individuals in the United States and European countries with extremely hardline positions. This is always the case. But yes, President Putin's stance remains the key factor. As you know, in our country, foreign policy is formulated by the head of state, that is, President Putin.
In a stark demonstration of Moscow's ceasefire intentions, Russia has intensified its daily attacks against Ukraine, targeting civilians and residential infrastructure with barrages of missiles and drones across the country. Zelensky has reiterated the calls to the US to sanction Russia, saying,
"The world has enough power to stop this and protect people." Ukraine looks forward to the implementation of every agreement on strengthening defense that has been reached with its partners. Every day of delay results in the loss of our people.
Маша, полицейский.